Well, greetings out there in YouTube land, and welcome to today's big video, which features the contents of this rather large box. Mitzi has been giving it the sniff test, and apparently it passed. Hopefully we'll get Jack in here to help us to open it up. Well, Jack is circling like a shark. Mitzi is lounging here, and it looks like we've got the old box in a box trick. Okay, let me hoist this beast out and we can continue our excavation. Well, after doing all sorts of excavation, we just got the quick sniff test from Jack. I finally found the contents buried like the sarcophagus of King Tut, and it's an ancient Valco amplifier cabinet. Okay, it turns out it's got this giant speaker in it, which is probably inappropriate. No amplifier itself. The old world-renowned wrapped wire handle, and a letter from the owner that I will share with you. The letter was accompanied by a PetSmart gift card, which will be much appreciated. And what it says, combined with the conversations that I've had with the owner, is that he wants us to build an original amplifier and probably a proper speaker for this old cabinet. He sent, quite nicely, a replacement handle for the top, which is a real shame to replace the infamous wrapped wire handle, but we'll just do that. Here's what I'm thinking. Rather than trying to duplicate the amplifier that was in this, why not construct something from scratch that's actually way better? And perhaps with a 12-inch speaker, and something that is going to perform way beyond whatever you would expect from an old cabinet like this. And to be honest, I'm kind of thinking about maybe a Princeton chassis or something of that sort. And as I said, it will have to be constructed from scratch to fit the cabinet properly and to function properly. Now that's going to take probably 1, 2, maybe 3 video sessions, and I haven't done this in ages where I actually just scratch build an amp, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. I think it'll be a really neat digression from the kind of repetitive amp repair videos. So I think it's time to haul this out to the workshop, start cleaning up the cabinet, taking our measurements, accessing the components and materials that we need, and let's start building a replacement amplifier for this really dingy old Valco cabinet that will perform like a real champ or Princeton. Okay, if that sounds interesting, let's get started. Do you agree? Mitzi? Mitzi? What do you think, girl? She loves it. Well, we've got the Valco cabinet out here in the workshop. Let's take a real close look at it and see if we can figure out exactly what we have here. First off, we see that it has a Supro tag. Okay, so that will narrow our search down a bit. The very typical Valco geometric openings for the speaker, pretty well mirrored on the back. We see here a serial number of what, X34206, which according to the Valco serial number site makes this a 1954 Supro. Now let's try to figure out what model it is that we have. In an attempt to determine the exact model of amplifier that originally came in the cabinet that we have, I entered 1954 Supro amplifier on the internet and found a link to one that was for sale on Reverb. And lo and behold, it is a 1954 Supro Supreme amp. And as you can see from the front appearance of it, it looks basically identical to the one that we have, even down to the missing handle. This tag right here doesn't look like the Supro tag, but that's because the dealer has its own tags made and removed the Supro tag and tacked that one in its place. Okay, so let's take a look at some other views of this amp and see if it really is all that identical. Well, no it isn't. Look here. The one in the ad has a band that goes all the way around the perimeter of the cabinet that appears to be black like a naugahyde material. So obviously there's some variation in the cabinets, but there is no doubt, just based on the openings here of the speaker, and when we look here at the back of the cabinet, it is identical. We see the very typical black painted Supro chassis with white horizontal stripes to allow the printing to show up to identify each of the components that is positioned on the rear control panel. We see that we have 3 instrument inputs, a chicken head knob for volume and a separate one for tone, and we have a toggle switch on and off and the power cord. I see no pilot light at all. Looking inside, we can see that it was double-ended with a probably 5Y3 rectifier, and over here we have 2 metal-bodied preamp tubes. Power transformer is sunken into the chassis so that it doesn't stick up high and interfere with the magnet of the speaker. And also, if you notice, there's no output transformer because there's no room for one down here. They have positioned it up here on the speaker basket. So now that we know that the amp cabinet goes to a Supro Supreme, I think it's time to check the internet sites that have schematics to see if we can find a proper schematic for a 1954 Supro Supreme that matches our cabinet. Okay, we're back out in the workshop where I've removed the upper back door. We see we have an Olsen speaker. Now, no doubt everybody out there in YouTube land owns like 6 or 8 Olsen speakers. I'll be honest, that's the first one I've ever seen, and it'll probably be the last. But I just think it sort of overpowers the cabinet, and I think it's going to have to go. Okay, it looks like the interior of the cabinet's in pretty good shape. Let's go ahead and remove the speaker, but first let's take a look at schematics and see if we can't find a really nice Supro Supreme schematic. And lo and behold, here we go. It's called the Model 510, and as you can see, remember we looked at the one on Reverb. It had 3 inputs. It uses a 6J7 pentode preamp tube, a 6SC7 for phase inversion, and it's double-ended with 2 6V6s. The original speaker had a field coil, so it was an electrodynamic speaker. 5Y3 rectifier, which is pretty typical, and the power transformer. So it looks like really very basic. Other than being double-ended, it's not much different from a champ circuit. Okay, just in a champ you'd have 3 tubes, but double-ended here we have 4 plus the rectifier. So let's think about if we want to duplicate this circuit or if we want to improve it. I'd kind of like to add tremolo. I think on little old amps like this, that tremolo is a nice touch. They're way too early for reverb, and there's no room in the cabinet really to add that. But I would like to add tremolo to this, and to be honest with you, my experience with pentoed preamp tubes, particularly the 6J7, is not the most favorable. For one thing, the amplification factor is only 17. And what I found is if you use this type of preamp and phase inversion, you're going to end up with an amp that's really good for use in the bedroom if you don't want to wake anybody up who's sleeping in the bedroom. In other words, the volume, overall output power, gain, everything, you name it, is not so hot. I really prefer 12AX7s, both for preamp and also one triode for to be a cathodiene phase inverter. That would leave me one more triode for my oscillation loop for a tremolo. So we might convert those to 12AX7s and pretty much leave the rest of it, other than the speaker, because I can't get an electrodynamic speaker. We're going to have to probably either use a filter choke or something else in here to compensate, and use a permanent magnet speaker. But those are just my thoughts at this moment. I reserve the right to change my mind later, but for now, keep this in mind, and keep in mind the proposed changes that I have mentioned. I have removed the Olson speaker from the cabinet, and as you can see, it's been reconed. It's a hi-fi speaker, it would appear, in that it has a built-in crossover with a tweeter concentric with the outer cone. As such, partly because of the kind of light weight of the cone, I'm thinking this is more of a hi-fi style speaker and really not appropriate for a guitar amp. So we'll set it on the shelf and then do some thinking about what would be a really nice replacement for it. Now, I think originally the amp came with a 10-inch speaker, and you can see here the holes and the line where the 10-inch gasket fit. And somebody in the past decided, well, let's put in a 12-inch, and they did us the great service of drilling holes in the cabinet to put in those studs, okay, which will probably have to be removed and concealed somehow if we go back to 10-inch, or we might go with a 12-inch, but there is an issue when you have a great big 12-inch speaker in here with clearance for your chassis. The chassis might actually have to have a portion cut out of it to clear the speaker. And if we go with a double-ended circuit, and if we add a tremolo, you've got a power transformer, you've got 3 large tubes over here, the 2 output and the rectifier, you've got the 2 preamp tubes over here, there's not a lot of room for an output transformer. So these sort of space constraints are something that we have to consider when we're designing a replacement chassis. Well, every restoration has to start somewhere, and let's start by removing this hideous twisted wire handle, and then once it's out of the way, we can start to try to clean up the material to see if we can get it back to its sort of golden tweed appearance. Okay, maybe not, but it's going to be worth trying, I think. Okay, so step 1, kiss this goodbye. Okay, that lovely handle's gone. Let's turn this over and practice some cleaning methods on the bottom of the cabinet, so if they don't work well or it gets mottled, it isn't right up here in your face. Okay, so let me flip the cabinet over and get some of my special cleaning supplies, and if any of them work, I will convey to you the brands that did work. Okay, maybe you can use them if you're ever confronted with a challenge like this in the future, and I hope you are. Okay, so hang on, let's flip this jewel over and start cleaning. Okay, here's what I'm going to try first. Car Guy's Premium Super Cleaner. This was recommended by a viewer several years ago. I ordered it online and I've used it. It's pretty powerful. You have to be careful with it on some materials. Okay, secondly, the rag I'm going to use really doesn't have any color to speak of in it. If you use a red rag and start rubbing up here, you're liable to get some of the dye into the material, which would ruin it. So we'll use a very bland rag, spray some of our super cleaner here and see what happens. Well, I'll tell you, a whole bunch of grime came off, and it's drying now, so it's going to look darker, but I don't know that it made a huge difference. As you can see, the areas here that are kind of light are not all that different from areas that didn't get the cleaner on them. We might be doomed here to just have this dingy cabinet look like it looks. Okay, let me try one other cleaner to see. I tried some different cleaners, and I had my best results with Resolve Carpet Cleaner and Windex. Now, here's that bottom. I don't know if you can see the sheen has been restored to it, and it's got a lot nicer kind of gold color. You know, it's not a huge difference, but I think it's definitely an improvement. So I'm going to go ahead and clean the rest of the cabinet, and then we'll continue. And just to show you what kind of filth we were dealing with, here are the rags that I used. This is only a portion of the dirt that was removed. As I'm looking over the top of the cabinet, I'm relieved to see that there are some of those infamous white spots that we find on the top of virtually every vintage amp that we work on. So we know it's legit. Well, I'm trying to decide here if I want to try to go with a 12-inch speaker in this cabinet, and I don't think it's going to work. If the chassis only goes back this deep, it's already against the basket. And the original chassis came up along this piece of wood right here up to the top. There's no way. So I really think 12 inches pushing it. I think that original speaker that was in here, that red one that came in the cabinet, that was a hi-fi speaker, I think somebody just simply converted this cabinet to be a some sort of external speaker, maybe for a stereo or a phonograph or something like that. And so there was no amp in the bottom, there is no chassis, so space was not a consideration. But since we're going to be constructing an amplifier in the bottom of this cabinet, I'm afraid the speaker is just going to have to be a 10-incher. Since we're going to go back to the 10-inch speaker, I'm removing the studs that had been installed for the 12-inch. I think they're the original 10-inch speaker studs that were just simply transplanted. Now I will reinstall them back where the 10-inch studs belong. As you can see, they have a splined area here that keeps them from turning while you're tightening the nuts that hold the speaker in. These are not just something you picked up at Ace Hardware, okay? These were original. So I will reinstall them, and then we'll try to figure out a nice way to conceal or somehow cover up the holes that they so graciously drilled to install that 12-inch speaker. Now the speaker studs have been returned to their normal position. If you go back and look at that picture of the original amp on Reverb, you'll see that they're located right here. And as I said, we're going to have to figure some sort of clever way to conceal the holes that were drilled. Now I thought about slathering those 12-inch speaker holes with like Bondo or something, and then I came to my senses and decided, why not turn down a piece of wooden dowel so that it will fit very snugly in the hole, and glue it in place, and that way on the front then we can address the damage to the cloth with a nice firm and original, you know, it was wood to begin with, might as well replace the hole with wood. Okay, so that's how I'm going to proceed. Let's see what you think. Here's the before and here's the after. There it is right there. The wood has about the same color as the tweed material, and other than the indentation from the head where it was hammered in or drawn in by the nuts that held the speaker. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, really not that glaring or obvious. I might still touch it up a little bit more. And there's the finished product from the front view and from the inside, where I used a magic marker to color the ends of the wood black to match the speaker grill. Now let's address what I think is the best way to replace the handle on the top of one of these cabinets. Now there's two ways to go. Some people grind off these rivets, or they pry them up, okay, which really tears up the wood, because the rivet goes in and at the end it spreads out. So if you try to pull this out, you're going to tear up a bunch of wood starting on the inside of the cabinet. My approach is to attack that center pin right there, okay, that holds the handle in place. Now here's the catch. The center pin has a head that is above and below the retention clamp here. So you can't just pull it out like a nail. Now the only way I've found to successfully remove this is to grind off the head and then cut the pin down here in half, so you can extract the upper portion and the lower portion from the cabinet. Okay, so let's figure out a good way to do that. Now there's all kinds of ways to grind the head off of that pin. What I do though is I protect the top of the bracket with masking tape, and in my case I use an air-driven die grinder, okay, just very, very carefully. I'm pretty good with one of these. I have a pretty steady hand with it, and so I can grind away the head very quickly. You could use a Dremel, or I don't know, maybe a file if you're really careful, but you need to eliminate the exposed part of the head. Now I'll do the other side here, and then we'll continue with the pin underneath. Now that the head has been ground away, you can take a center punch and drive the pin downward into the cabinet so that this part is clear of the bracket. Now to cut that pin in half, you could, and I've done this, grind down a hacksaw blade so it's half as wide as normal, protect the cabinet with cloth or tape, and then saw through. I cheated and I used an air body saw, which took about 2 seconds to cut through the pin. If you don't have one of these, well then start grinding on a hacksaw blade. And here, if you're careful, is the end result. The bracket is unharmed and the pin is gone. Now here's the pin. They're not very long. The nail really doesn't go down deep into the cabinet. There's that kind of a double riveted head that I cut off with the air saw. Okay, so one down and one to go. And there's the second bracket with that pin removed. Now we can install our new handle and create new pins to hold it in place. Here's our new handle in place and centered between the brackets, and now let's fabricate something that will pin the new handle in and look sort of original and also be secure. Well, I found a couple old flathead nails, and I did a little sanding on the top here because I'm going to antique the heads of these once they're in place. I drilled a very small diameter hole from here down to the inside of the cabinet so that the nail would be able to pass more easily. Now it's time to install our handle. I just tap the nails into place, and now the handle is firmly secured. I'm going to antique these shiny nail heads right now, and then we'll go inside the cabinet and bend the end of the nail over so that it cannot ever just fall out. You can see then that the rest of the nail that protruded into the cabinet has been laid over flat so that those pins can never come out. Now we'll antique the head. And to do that, I'm going to use a little gun bluing that you can get at any gun shop or Cabela's or any place like that. One of those stores that caters to hunters. Okay, so I'm going to dab a little bit of the gun blue onto each of those nail heads and make them look ancient. There, we'll leave it on there for a while, and pretty soon it will have a patina that's very similar to the bracket. Okay, so now we have our handle secured, and for all the world, looks like it's the original handle that came on the amplifier. Now that speaker size has been determined, we have to decide on the final circuit that's going to be built. That way we'll know what components to order. I'm going to, I think, keep, say, at least half or more of the Supreme circuit. We're going to go with the same type of power transformer, the 5Y3 rectifier, the same primary winding without the depth cap. We can't have a, well, I don't have an electrodynamic speaker with a field coil, so we will go with a permanent magnet speaker, two 6V6s in push-pull, and I'm going to then use some elements of the 6G2 Fender Princeton, very early form, and we see that the Princeton has grounded cathodes, and it is going to be fixed bias. I am going to stick with the cathode biasing of the 6V6s as it was done in the Supro Supreme. I'm going to use one of the triodes of a 12AX7 as our cathodyne phase inverter, and we will use a 12AX7 as our preamp tube instead of the 6J7, and I will put the volume and tone controls in between the two triodes, which is kind of a tried and proven place to put them. It really works better that way. That leaves us a fourth triode, okay, 1, 2, 3, and the fourth triode will be the oscillator, and I may well use the Princeton tremolo circuit. It really works well and sounds great. I might change some of the aspects of it, but what we're going to end up with then is sort of a hybrid between the original Valco Supro Supreme and sort of an updated and I think higher performing circuit that will also include tremolo. There'll be maybe some minor changes along the way, which I'll discuss with you, but that's what I'm planning. So now it's time to order parts. Now, in some of my previous scratch build videos, people ask for a parts list, and actually I think asking me for a parts list is probably a little bit silly and lazy, because I think you need to get in the habit of making your own parts list. What you will do is you will go through the schematic and make a list of each of the components: the power transformer, fuse holder and proper fuse, on-off toggle switch, primary wire, and go through and just look at what the schematic tells you are the parts you need. Now, there's a couple decisions you'll have to make, because they're not really going to tell you exactly what power transformer to use. They will translate it to a early part number like this one here, and you might be able to look up equivalent transformers on the internet. But as far as output transformer and power transformer, those are decisions you kind of have to make based on what type of tubes you're going to use, okay, what their load resistance will be, and what is the impedance of the speaker you're going to use. I'm going to use an 8 ohm speaker. Okay, so we'll go through then and we can check each of the capacitor values, the resistor values, and we can make a list. I did it on the back of one of these pages. Now I have on hand most of the components that we need here. I ordered a Hammond power transformer for the Princeton reverb amp, which will be more than enough to power the circuit that we're going to build. I made sure that it had the 5-volt winding for the 5Y3. That's something you need to be sure is provided on the power transformer you order if you're going to use a tube rectifier. I ordered a similar output transformer for the Princeton, in which we use two 6V6s to power an 8-ohm speaker. As far as the other components, like I said, I had most of them. I did not have 30 microfarad at 450 filter caps, which is what I'm going to use instead of the 10s that they used on the Supreme. I think that the 30s are going to work better for us. So I had to order those, and I got 30s at 500 volt just to play it safe, to have a little margin of safety. I had to order, no, actually I had the two bases on hand with the shielded bases for the 12AX7. I did have to order some odd pots. Look at this, 3 meg reverse audio. That's not something I have just hanging around the workshop. Had to order that. And then notice that the intensity pot, 250K, well, I've got a bunch of those, but not linear. So I had to order one of those. And that's just the way it goes. You make sure that you have the jacks that you need, and the bypass caps, that you have the specific resistors. I ordered 2 watt 1,000 and 10,000 ohm internodal resistors, and I used metal oxide resistors for that purpose. Okay, those are kind of special, and I ordered them just to make sure I had them. So that's the way it goes. If you're going to build some other circuit, something else you've decided on, that's the method to use, is to go through and just, this tells you all the components you need and where you need to make a decision. You can use the part number that they provide, or you can just go through and look at transformers that will provide sufficient current and voltage output for 6V6s. It's really not all that difficult, and it's a skill you need to develop instead of asking someone to provide it for you. The other thing I get asked about is a layout diagram. And to me, that's sort of cheating, because what people are going to try to do, I think, is without trying to understand the circuit or the purpose of any of the components, they're just simply going to go in and solder in certain resistors and capacitors where it shows on this diagram. And to me, like I said, that's cheating. You're not going to learn anything besides maybe manual dexterity and how to use a soldering iron. I am going to only use the schematic, and probably because I'm using a hybrid here of the two, I might end up having to draw a schematic that includes the different portions of each circuit that I'm going to use. But I do not personally use layout diagrams. Now, I'm not saying that I might not produce one for this circuit, but I would really prefer it, if any of you wanted to build one of these, to go by the schematic instead of just slavishly, like a kid playing in the sandbox, putting the resistor here and the capacitor here. Okay, it's time to take the training wheels off the bike and start pedaling on your own. Okay, so we're going to be using the schematic, whether it's this one, or some hand-drawn hybrid that I create. But that's how I really recommend that you proceed, whether you're building the circuit that I'm going to be building or any circuit of your choice. Now that we've got the cabinet optimized to where it has not lost any of its original patina, but it looks just as good as it naturally can, and while we're waiting for the components that have been ordered to arrive, I think it's time to make measurements here and form the chassis. Now to do this, I have a virtually flawless sheet of aluminum that is 50 thousandths of an inch thick. I'm going to use this to form the chassis. Now there's two schools of thought on chassis. Some favor steel, which you can solder to, so you can solder grounds to the steel chassis. But on the other side, there is aluminum. Aluminum is much easier to work with. You can cut your holes, bend, everything else easier. It is lighter. It will not oxidize really or corrode. And finally, believe it or not, it conducts electricity better than steel. The one drawback is that I cannot solder to this. So our ground connections will have to be securely bolted down with lock washers. I know that some viewers will be telling me I shouldn't do this, but that's what I'm going to do anyway. Okay, so save your breath. So this is what we're going to use. I've taken the measurements, and if you look in here, it comes up 3 inches, comes over 3 3/4, and then up 1 1/2. So I've drawn a side view then of the chassis with external measurements. Step 1 will be to cut this piece of aluminum down to where it is the proper width for the chassis, and then we'll measure and get our length, and then we'll start folding it at the 2 proper locations. I marked off the aluminum sheet at 14 1/16 by a tiny bit over 8 1/4 to leave a little leeway for the bends. And now I'm going to use a bandsaw with a metal cutting blade to cut along these lines and get our rectangular sheet of aluminum from which we will form our chassis. Well, the piece of aluminum has been cut out to be exactly the right width and length, and now it's time to start making 90-degree bends at these 2 locations. I'm going to put dotted lines on the aluminum to show where the bends should be. Alright, I have laid out the dotted lines for the bends that are going to take place. I think it's a good idea to use the dotted or broken lines for bends, and then solid lines for cuts. So if on one piece of metal you have both bends and cuts, you won't get confused about which is which. Well, the parts have arrived for our Supro amp rejuvenation. It's kind of amusing that the box the parts came in is considerably larger than the cabinet that they're going to have to fit into. So, but let's go ahead and get this open and lay them all out and make sure that we have everything we need to get started. Well, here's the majority of the parts we're going to need to build the amp. We've got a brand new Jensen C10Q speaker, 2 basses, pots, power rail resistors, a brand new matched pair of red bass tube amp Doctor 6V6s. Got a power transformer that's a little stouter than we actually need, and the same with our output transformer. We've got our fuse holder, indicator light, switches, jacks, terminal strips, and a group of vintage 12AX7s. And I'm going to experiment around and pick the best 2 that I can find in that group. Okay, and of course here's our aluminum chassis waiting to be drilled and bent into shape. Now I was going to warn you, if any of you think it's, you're going to save money by building your own amp from scratch, be prepared to spend about $400 or more just on the parts to go in it. Okay, and then either you have an old cabinet to put it in, or you have to make a cabinet. and you're going to need to cover the cabinet. You'll need a handle, feet, and all that. So it's not a cheap proposition. I just wanted to warn you. But enough of that. I think it's time to lay out our design here for our cutouts and drilling on our chassis. I decided to go ahead and do all the machine work on the chassis while it's flat, simply because it's going to be very difficult because of the weird shape of this. Remember, it's like an S, and it's going to be hard to get it laid flat and to keep this part from interfering. So I'm going to machine it flat and then bend it into shape. And I should add, while I'm putting all these parts in a safe place, this is just the phase 1 of the ordering. Phase 2 will be all the things that I forgot to order in phase 1. Okay, no matter how careful you try to be, you're always going to miss something. Okay, I'm just going to warn you and wait and see if it's not true. And a special treat for those of you who watched my last amp fabrication video, in which I used sledgehammers and 2x4s to bend the 16 gauge chassis into shape, necessitating several days in the ICU afterwards. Not to mention apologies to all my neighbors for the language. I, while waiting for the parts to arrive, made a sheet metal brake. And let me show you just a few of the details, and then a little later we'll get to see it in action. I was going to go to Harbor Freight and plunk down $50 for their 18-inch sheet metal brake, but then I watched a review of it on YouTube where a guy was trying to bend 16 gauge aluminum like we're going to, and I swear it looked like it was more trouble than my old 2x4s and sledgehammers. So I decided to design and make my own. Now here is an end view, and it's made out of 3/16 C channel, both this piece and this piece. Okay, and then I made a hinge bracket here, welded in a 5/8 dowel, steel dowel, and so it pivots around that point, which is exactly the point of intersection of the two faces here of the C channel. I then welded a piece of 1/2-inch plate to the bottom so I could pinch it up in my vise. Therefore this thing does not need a dedicated surface space, which I have none to spare. Let me put it in the vise and then show you how the rest of it works. Alright, I've secured the unit in the vise, put the front plate down, and then I just place the bending, sort of almost like a blade here. The metal will be bent around the leading edge of this piece here. Now this was C-channel also, but I cut off the vertical part and then ground it down to sort of a dull point. I don't think you want a sharp point on this, or else you might actually cut the metal. Now the thing that I didn't think of at first, but then I found out the hard way, is you've got to gap it back equal to, or maybe a tiny bit more than the thickness of the metal you're going to bend, or else you're just going to crush the metal. Okay, so that's what these back here are for. I've got adjustment bolts and then jam nuts that will hold it exactly the thickness of the aluminum that we're going to be bending. So let's just put a small piece of aluminum in here and bend it, just so you can see it in action later when we do our chassis. Of course, that's when you'll really see it in all its glory. Instead of a piece of aluminum, I got a piece of sheet steel. And as you can see, this top clamping piece is held in place with two C-clamps, nothing real elegant. And now you're really going to get a laugh out of what I use for a lever, which is simply a crescent wrench. Now if you look over here on the side, I've got a mark that tells me exactly when I've reached 90 degrees. And when I drop it back down, we see that we have a nice sharp bend, 90 degrees in our sheet metal. We'll see this again when I'm shaping the chassis, but I think that's a pretty good explanation of how it works. And there's our bend. We've got a small smooth radius so we don't actually break the metal. Despite the name of the tool, but this gives us, I think, a really nice bend for our chassis. Step one for me is always perfectly centering, drawing, and cutting out a hole for the recessed power transformer. I'm going to drill holes in all four corners, and I'm going to use that drill bit to form the radius of the corners. So now let's mark a spot here for our 4 radius holes, and then we'll get ready to drill and then cut. The 4 holes have been drilled, and as you can see, the radius of the hole matches the radius of the protruding part of the transformer, so it'll be a nice snug fit. Now I've got to cut straight lines connecting like a tangent line here, connecting each of the 4 drill holes, and then the center falls out and the transformer falls in. Now I prepare to use the most hated tool in my arsenal, the reciprocating handsaw, which never fails to vibrate, thrash around, break blades, and generally humiliate me. So I can't wait to get started. Next, carefully measure the 4 transformer studs. I use a caliper, and then mark your spots for the studs to protrude through the chassis. Use a center punch and then drill them out. And let's see if I got lucky. Almost always you have to use a file to sort of elongate the hole in one direction or the other. Let's see how this works. Okay, let's see how this goes. Wow, not bad. I did cheat a little. I used the file a tiny bit, I gotta confess, but it fits in beautifully. So now lock washers and nuts, and our power transformer is installed. Now let's move on to the position for our tube bases, and then drill the holes for them. Now before we start positioning the components, I'm going to show you something, and you better keep this in mind or you're going to really screw up. And that is that, remember that our chassis is going to sit on this piece of wood, which happens to be 3/4 of an inch wide. That means that this 3/4 of an inch over here on the side of your chassis, actually both sides of your chassis, cannot be used for any purpose. Okay, if you put a component here, it's going to collide with the wood, if you pardon the expression. So we've got to mark that 3/4 inch wood support both on the top of the chassis and on the front of the chassis. So let's do that, and then we'll start positioning our tube bases. Okay, I've clearly marked the no man's land here on our aluminum chassis, and now we can begin to get a sort of a pleasing to the eye layout for our tubes. And I'm thinking rectifier in the rear and the 2 6v6s up front, where we can keep an eye on them. Okay, and also when we install these, we're going to be sure that our directional notches are all aimed in the same direction. It's just kind of a little pro touch, and it makes it easier when you're putting your tubes back in if they all go in the same orientation. Okay, so now I'm going to get out the ruler and draw this so that it's perfectly measured, and then I'm going to drill the holes for these tube bases. Okay, here's my final configuration, and I've measured distance in and made that equidistant for both. This one's centered, these two are centered on either side of it. One thing to keep in mind is to keep your tubes fairly far apart if possible, so that you don't have heat issues. Okay, you've got to get air in here to ventilate around the tubes and keep them cool. So I think in the space I had allotted, that's about the best I can do. So now it's time to drill. I'm going to use a step bit, and we're going to drill. I need to use the caliper here on the Michael-X portion of the tube base to see exactly what size hole we need. Well, it turns out they're rather odd size, 1 3/16, but fortunately the step bit has a 1 3/16 step, And what I've done is mark it so that as I'm going down through each successive increase in diameter, I don't doze off and let it go past. So that'll be my mark. I'm going to stop on this step. Well, I drilled the pilot holes, and I have the step bit all chucked up and cleverly marked. I also removed the other marks down here because I don't need anything to confuse me anymore. And be sure that your support block has a hole that can accommodate the step bit. Okay, so I think it's time to start drilling those holes. There you have the 3 holes cut to the 1 3/16 size. You can see how the little Michael X tube socket fits through perfectly. We'll have to drill the holes now to hold the little ears in underneath. And I don't know if sometimes I rivet, sometimes I use nuts and bolts. I'm thinking the rivets are going to probably stay put longer. So that's our next job, drilling the screw holes. And here on the step bit, everything went great. And there's a little tip, and that is when you get down here and you have reached the proper step, flip the metal over and use this upper kind of chamfering edge here that's going to the next step to chamfer the holes and make them nice and smooth. Okay, so now it's time to mark and drill for our retaining screws or rivets. There, the holes are drilled for the retaining rivets for the rectifier and 6v6 tube sockets. Now we can address the left side here of the chassis for our 12AX7 sockets. Remember also we have a output transformer to mount, and we'll have to figure out where to put it. Okay, so for now though, it's just the two 12AX7s. Now it's time to lay out the portion of the chassis to the left of the power transformer. And I'm thinking two 12AX7s in very similar configuration and setback as the 6v6s. And then the speaker output jack. So we'll have our speaker right up here and it'll plug in here, or you can unplug it and plug in a speaker cabinet. And here will be the tremolo pedal. Plug in if you happen to want to use a pedal. And I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything out, so I went ahead and just did kind of a preliminary layout of the way the control panel will look. And this will be our input jacks from the guitar. One will be high gain and medium gain, and then we'll have our volume control, tone control, tremolo intensity, tremolo speed, switchable NFB loop, indicator light, AC on off, and our fuse accessible from the rear without having to pull the chassis out or take off the back door. So I think that's kind of the way it's going to look. So with I don't think I've left anything out, so I'm going to go ahead then and drill the holes and for the 12AX7 tube bases, and for the speaker jack and the tremolo pedal. After a little shuffling around, I came up with this arrangement for the left hand side here, and that's going to be the center for each of the 12AX7 tube sockets, and this will be the speaker jack and the tremolo foot switch jack. The portion of the 12AX7 tube base that will go through the chassis is this ceramic part, and it's 7/8 of an inch. So there'll be 7/8 inch hole here and here. Using the step bit, I have drilled two 7/8 inch holes in the chassis surface, and the 12AX7 sockets fit in just right. I also drilled a 3/8 hole for each of the jacks. I realize they'll be coming in from beneath, but this is the way you can check for your clearance. So it looks like we're well on our way then to getting our chassis all machined up and ready to start wiring. Next we have to concern ourselves with the final layout of all the controls on the front panel, and then all the drilling and other preparations for them to be mounted. And before I forget, I've got to drill the holes for the rivets that will secure the 12AX7 bases to the chassis. Well, now the top part of our chassis is finished. I cleaned up some of my markings and ran over it with a Scotch-Brite just to give it sort of a satin finish. And like I said before, it's time to focus now on our control panel. Now that we're done with the top of the chassis, now it's time for the control panel. Once again, I've laid out the components in what I think is a pleasing configuration here, where the power supply is kept over on the right hand side. I've added one more switch. Okay, one of these is to switch the NFB loop on and off, and the other, I was thinking, since the Supreme does not use a cathode bypass cap, why don't we have a switchable cathode bypass cap? Okay, it might work great, it might not, but I think it'd be an interesting touch. Then we'll have the 4 pots for the volume, tone, intensity, and speed of the tremolo, and then the inputs, high gain and low gain. So now, as I did on the top of the chassis, I am going to draw lines that are perfectly centered and spaced, and then begin machining the holes for each of these components. Alright, I've drawn out my grid here, and at these intersections I'm going to use my center punch to dimple the aluminum, and then I will drill the proper size hole through each of those locations. I used a 3/16 bit to drill pilot holes at each of the dimpled intersections, and now it's time to enlarge those holes to the proper size to fit the components. And now that I think of it, dimpled intersections might be a good name for a rock band. On some of these smaller holes, like the 3/8, you can make a really neat chamfering tool out of a tap wrench and a 45-degree countersink, and you just push that into the drilled hole and rotate it, and you get a really nice smooth chamfer around the edge. This will give you a good idea of how well that works. Here's the hole as drilled, and here it is after just a couple spins of that countersinking bit. All the holes have been drilled, and I warn you, when you're doing this, double check the diameter of each of the components. It turned out that reverse audio speed pot for the tremolo was only 5/16 instead of 3/8, so you have to be real careful. Okay, I use a micrometer or a caliper and measure each before I drill, and also I use my world famous D-shaped drill to get the hole here for the fuse holder. You really need to have that flat there, otherwise when you try to unscrew the fuse holder and it starts spinning, you're going to have to pull the chassis to change the fuse, okay, which is not real convenient. So be sure you use my patented D-shaped bit. The holes are all drilled and double checked. All the extra marks have been removed, and now it's a matter of simply putting this sheet into our patent pending sheet metal brake, and bend the rear of the chassis up and the front of the chassis, which is actually the control panel, down. Okay, so I think it's time to do that. The aluminum chassis sheet is now securely clamped into the sheet metal brake, and now it's time to grab a hold of this edge and lift it up a little past 90 degrees so that when the metal springs back, it'll be exactly at 90 degrees. I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous about this because any sort of screw up and all of the machining will go to waste, which is kind of a shame. Okay, so let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, here we go. Looks perfect. Well, it looks nice and straight. Let's check the perpendicularity of it. 90, 90, 90. Okay, I pronounce that bend to be as good as it gets. Now let's finish by bending our control panel down. Our chassis is firmly clamped in the sheet metal brake, and now it's time to get out the trusty crescent wrenches and make our 90-degree bend. If the first bend was scary, this one's horrifying, because anything that goes wrong is right up in your face. Okay, so once again, fingers crossed. Okay, here we go. Woo, looks good. Well, I got it outside where we can get a little better look at it, and boy, those right angles look really nice and sharp. Control panel, tube bases, and I know you're wondering, where is this crazy old coot going to put the output transformer? Well, I have an idea, and I'm going to share it with you in just a second. Also, it's really important to see how it fits in the cabinet, and it's absolutely perfect. Snug against the wood all the way around. So, I think we're in really good shape here, and now it's time to devise a way to mount the output transformer. I don't know about you, but I'm a little burned out after all this hard work in this hot, sweltering workshop. Let's go get some fresh air. Well, it looks like it's time for part 2 of the 1932 Ford Roadster video series. I'm going to remove these 2 button head Allen bolts at the bottom of the hood sides and remove them. I'll show you how they're held on. Once I get one of the sides off, we'll check it out. Okay, so I'm going to set down the camera and do that. Here's the inside surface of the hood panel. You'll see there's 2 1/4-inch pins protruding out from this top flange here, and at the bottom there is a perpendicular, fairly stout sheet metal protrusion that comes out here at a 90-degree angle, and I'm holding it by the screws that hold those stainless steel handles, and you'll see how that works in just a second. Alright, the hood side is removed, engine is exposed. You'll see here I mentioned in the earlier video about the 90-degree right angle polished aluminum strips that are running here, and the bottom supports the hood, and the hood is held down with 4 recessed head button head Allen screws that go into captive nuts that are up inside here within the hood. So the hood is held down to this piece, and remember the little pins that stuck out the top of the hood panel, the side panel, they fit into holes in this same strip. So the pins go up here and hold the top of the panel, and then that protruding ledge at the bottom comes in here, and it has kind of a spring action, and it pops into place right over this horizontal beam and locks in so that the hood panel will stay in place even without the Allen bolts, and this supports all the weight. The Allen bolts then will screw into these 2 holes here just to sort of hold the hood in place, but really it is being supported by this steel strip and that ledge that you saw that was attached to the stainless steel handle. I fabricated this and I haven't painted it yet, but I promise I will in the near future. As for the engine, if you recall in the first video I said that it started life as a 350 Chevy, but it's been stroked out to 383 cubic inches. The headers are from Hedman. They are jet coated. The heads are angle plug with the kind of swirling combustion chambers. What appear to be billet valve covers, and a high-rise Edelbrock manifold that has the air gap beneath the plenum of the carburetor with a 650 Holley and a saddle-shaped Holley air cleaner. I've got a brand new 150 amp chrome alternator that's held by just a really snazzy billet alternator mount with the tension adjustment built in. Got all the pulleys, water pump, and you notice a large electric fan. I believe this is a Spall fan. You really don't want to skimp on these fans. You can buy them for like $40 or $240, and in the long run you're way better off with the $240 one. You want something that can really move air. Engines like this do tend to warm up a bit. This one's about 10.5 to 1 compression, so it does generate some heat. So you really, especially here when it's 110 degrees outside, you really do need to have a good high quality aluminum radiator and a stout fan to suck air through it even when you're standing still in traffic. Let's go over to the other side. Now here's the other side of the engine. About the only thing different is the automatic transmission, filler, chrome starter and solenoid, chrome fuel pump. I really like these corrugated metal covers for the radiator hoses. Really much more attractive than just the old black rubber hoses. You can see a fuel pressure gauge, better view of that Holley carburetor, and the overflow tank for the radiator. And I guess that's about it. Now let's roll it out and to the driveway, and I'll start it up. Now this engine has a radical solid lifter roller cam, but those of you who know anything about cars, listen closely. I think the sound of the solid lifters are going to be unmistakable. Really makes for a neat kind of old-fashioned hot rod sound to the engine. Okay, so I'm going to roll it out now and we'll start it up. Okay, I've set the camera up on the tripod. It'll give you another look at the engine out here in daylight. Now I'm going to get in the car and start it. Now this engine is absolutely ice cold, so hopefully it'll start easily. It normally does, unless of course there's a video camera aimed at the engine. But anyway, here we go. If you heard something that sounded sort of like a castanet solo, that's the solid lifters. They're unmistakable. Now, when I first started it, the engine was cold. I had to let it idle for, I don't know, 15 or 20 seconds. But you notice that the idle is real lumpy and uneven. Well, that's just the way it is because of the cam. It doesn't stall. It pulls hard. There's no hesitation or anything else, but it does lope. Okay, and that's kind of why you put a cam like this into a hot rod. It makes it sound like a hot rod. Now let's shift the camera back to the exhaust and I'll start it again. Okay, fasten your seat belts. Here we go for a big ride. dilithium crystals are full charge. Okay, let me back out of the driveway and we'll go for a little spin. Here we are stuck in traffic with the popos right beside us, and all we got is our loping engine to keep us company. Well, that's about it. As my old granny used to say, any cruise that you survive is a good one. We're back home. Everything's seems to be running okay. I appreciate you joining me for the ride, and the traffic was bad, police were thick, but I'd like to think we had a good time anyway. I really prefer the car with the hood sides in place. I know hot rods usually have the engine exposed, but I think it gives it a nicer, kind of a sleeker, old-fashioned look. And let them wonder what's under the hood. Okay, so here is without hood sides, hood side on, without hood sides, hood side on. Well, I guess that's about it for chapter 1 of our video series, in which we construct an amplifier to fit within this ancient Valco Supro Supreme cabinet. I hope you enjoyed the ride in the 32 Ford and are anxiously awaiting chapter 2 of our video series, which should be out in the next few weeks. Meanwhile, I wanted to thank all of our Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors for keeping us on the air and advertising free for the last few years. Without their support, there would be no videos for the rest of you to enjoy. Should you want to join them in supporting our channel, I will put links in the video description to enable you to do so. So until we meet again in the chapter 2 video in our series, I wish you all the very best of health and happiness, and I hope you stay tuned, because we'll be back soon. See you then.